But that's one reason that we could have got started a little bit later. But also, it's been more back and forth than in the past.
Less line items.
They've got a detailed budget. I don't know how much they're going to go into. Each one. You were watching it?
Yeah.
How does it look on TV? I was going to tell Bill this year, watch me on TV. Put it on silent mode, and you're good to go. You've got everything you need. You got your response by account code and everything. Well, that's true.
That's why I adjourned.
Good evening. I'd like to call this budget hearing to order, and tonight we will hear from Emergency Services and the Police Department. That, Chief Operating Officer.
Good evening. I have with me here this evening Jose Sanchez, who's the Director of Management and Budget, and to his right, Andy Jaffe, who's the Director of the Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications, and also joined by us with us is Renee Richards from the Management and Budget Office, and she's going to be helping with the presentation. So with that in mind, Andy.
Thank you. Council President Wooden, Majority Leader Aponte, and other distinguished members of the Common Council. My name is Andrew Jaffe, and I am the Director of Emergency Services and Telecommunications as introduced. Try this, a little better? Okay, my apologies.
No, she just didn't believe what you said about this distinguished.
All right. So, the recommended budget for the Department of Emergency Services for fiscal year 2013-2014, $4,833,549. This is $36,605 less than the fiscal year 12-13 adopted budget. Personnel expenses are greater by $66,371, mostly contributed to contractual obligations for COLAs and growth increments. Overtime remained flat from the 12-13 budget year at $304,000. Non-personal expenses was reduced by $102,976. Current vacancies in the department, there are a total of 18. 16 emergency telecommunication operators or dispatchers, 1 clerk typist, and 1 311 constituent service representative. Next slide. For anyone who is unfamiliar with the department and the functions of emergency services and telecommunications, the primary responsibility is the operations of the Public Safety Dispatch Center. Also is the HeartLink system management, also the two-way radio system, commonly referred to. The false alarm management program, the 311 call center, information technology, and the administration. The next slide is representative of our incoming dispatch call volume. This is just incoming 911 call volume into the dispatch center. The current year, 2012-13 average is slightly lower from the 11-12 average, and a little bit lower than the previous year at 10-11 of about 34,000. Next slide. This represents the dispatch activity for the current fiscal year by service. As you can see, the police is the predominant service driver for the dispatch center, representing 79% of all call volume, followed by EMS at 22,792 runs, or 12%, and fire at 16,735 runs, or 9% of the total call volume or dispatch load. The next slide represents the 2012 calendar year comparison call volume for the dispatch center compared to Bridgeport, New Haven, and Waterbury. As you can see, the Hartford Dispatch Center is above all other three major municipalities. This is a consistent trend year after year. The Hartford Dispatch Center regularly is above in call volume than the rest of the state. The next chart is representative of the incoming 311 call volume. This year's call volume is down from last year and down from the previous year. Initiatives going into the next year budget: implementation of a new computer-assisted dispatch system, and an update of the internal training program to come in line with the new CAD system and other advances and changes to technology at the building. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be willing to take any questions.
Thank you. Councilman Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jaffe. How are you?
Very good, sir. Thank you.
Good. You talked about 18 vacancies. Specifically, can you give a little more detail for what are those 18 vacancies?
Well, 16 of them, as I said, are dispatch positions.
Okay.
We currently have a recruitment that just completed. We received over 300 applications. We have a typing test scheduled for May 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. After which point we will continue the testing process until we get an eligibility list to begin hiring. The other two positions, one is a clerk typist position. That is the administrative position that manages the false alarm management program, sends out invoices, receives payment for alarm fines, sends out registration renewals, and accepts appeal letters. The third position is one full-time 311 call center representative. The recruitment for the 311 call center representative has completed, and about 114 applications have been received by Human Resources.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chairman, through you. What happens when the system goes down? I understand we had a little difficulty. Can you take us through that and kind of give us where we are?
Yes. On Monday, there was a break in the fiber tech strand of fiber that goes from the public safety complex to Jennings Road and then to Constitution Plaza. It broke. It's nothing that was within the city's control. It was something that is managed and outsourced to fiber tech. That strand broke. When that strand broke, the public safety complex lost its internal data network. So internally, none of the computers had any intelligence. They didn't know what IP addresses they had. They didn't know how to navigate to IP addresses. However, throughout the entire outage, 911 services remained functional and radio communications remained functional. What was not operational at that point was the computer-aided assisted dispatch center. However, staff is very familiar with protocols to follow when the CAD system goes down, and we were able to successfully manage the calls for service that were coming in.
Is there moving forward, is there a precautionary measure that we can take in the event this happens again?
Yes, I spoke with MHIS this afternoon to set up another redundant ring internally within the public safety complex that's unreliable on any external fiber or anything else for DHCP or IP address authentication to avoid this from happening again.
Additional cost for that?
Any cost will be absorbed by the 911 subsidy as it supports the dispatch center.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you. Good evening, Mr. Jaffe.
Good evening.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
I want to take you back to some conversations that were had at an NRZ meeting that we both were in attendance at.
Yes.
I understand how the 311 system operates in terms of when a call comes in and there's a problem, say it's a pothole or whatever, that is sent to the appropriate department for them to follow up on. It's that department's responsibility to complete that order, that work order, if you will. And my question is, has there been any explanation as to how you could get that data from that department to come back to 311 so that if the caller calls your dispatchers again, that they actually have the information in front of them as to what the result of that service call was?
Yep. We had a meeting with Tyler Technology, which is the provider of the 311 Munis Connect application, and Munis, which is our financial management system, and we made several enhancement requests. One of them was for a more timely exchange of data and status updates when a work order status changes from approved or canceled or completed. We want to know each of those status changes at the 311 Connect side so that we don't have to go onto the work orders and search that system. We can stay on the 311 Connect application that's for the call center and have real-time data that way. Tyler Technology accepted those, and they've committed to developing that work enhancement at no cost to the city because they acknowledge that it will make their application better and more sellable to their other customers.
And that's good news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Kennedy.
I'll yield time to Councilman Jesus and just follow the pattern if that's okay with the chair.
Oh, because I'm going over here after you. Okay.
When Councilman Anderson asking questions about the radio system as it currently is operating right now. Right now, is the system operational?
The radio system never went down.
And what about the ability for officers within their patrol vehicles to call in, get requests back from the department, that type of thing? Is that operational at this particular moment?
The mobile data application, which is out in the vehicles, has two processes. One process is the ability to run license plates, check people for wanted, missing persons. That system never went down because that is outside and separate of any data infrastructure within the public safety complex. What went down for the officers in the vehicles was the ability to get CAD data, computer-assisted dispatch data, call history or call location information. That was the piece that, if anything, broke in the car.
And is that operational or not operational as we speak?
It's operational.
How long has it been operational?
It was fixed Monday.
Okay, I've heard something different, so I'm trying to get in terms of,
Yeah, no.
it's currently, as you know, it is operational at this moment.
Yes.
Councilman Cruz.
Thank you and good evening, and through the chair. I heard that as far as 911 call volume, you said that I look at the graph and it says that it's been consistent with staying higher than other major cities.
Yes.
And so my first question is in regards to the volume of that. If that volume goes down, does that mean that the cost of running 911 calls goes down?
I would not necessarily say that if our call volume goes down, our cost of operating the call center would go down. There is some level of minimum staffing that I must maintain to ensure that calls are answered in a timely manner. there's always, you don't want to predict the future by looking at call data today and look tomorrow and say, okay, I can get away with one less staff member. All it takes is one isolated event or incident, and if I'm not properly staffed, those phones don't get answered.
And just a follow-up question, and through the chair. And so, is there a reason why we're higher than other cities? I know that sometimes our services, but can there be any calls that are coming in that people just don't understand the 911 service?
There are certainly calls that are received through the 911 lines that are definitely not 911 in nature. I've heard, my staff has heard the gamut of unnecessary calls to 911. Whether those calls come into 911 or whether they come in through the administration line, it's still a telephone call that has to get answered.
No more for. Thank you.
Councilman De Jesus.
Thank you, through the chair. Just quick questions on I guess I'll start with the positive. I do see that I think the reaction of the community of calling in crime or for whatever reason, it seems to be very high in Hartford. So I see that when I see a call volume higher than Bridgeport, New Haven, and Waterbury, clearly means that we have concerned citizens and they're seeing things and they're calling it in. So that makes me very proud as a councilman that the people are active and are speaking and reaching out to the police department. So that I give thanks to the administration. I want to go over your non-personnel reductions. It was stated on the slideshow that $102,976 were reduced. Can you indicate to me where those reductions were done?
The biggest portion of that reduction was in two line items. The org is 213005.
Yeah, 573025.
213005.
Yep, and then 590051.
573019.
Yep.
That's one reduction. That was $10,000. That was funds moved to the capital account. The other line item that was a significant cut was 213007 573025. That was $75,000 of expenses moved to the capital line. So that right there represents 85,000 of that figure.
All right, so and that technically is, I guess, is a savings in your department, but this is not a savings to the city.
I would defer to MNB.
The answer to your question, Councilman De Jesus, is yes and no. It is a savings to the general fund, but it's an expense to the capital fund.
So, again, so we're not going to be paying this. This is not going to be no longer included into the general fund. You're saying we're going to move this to the CIP, you said, right?
That's correct.
The overtime. The overtime for the dispatch center. So you're going to replace, or you're going to add 18 new employees, or one community service 311 typist.
16 vacancies for the dispatch center.
Why not a reduction on overtime?
Presently, the way the budget is built, based on the mayor's recommendations, to bring the reductions that were requested through administration, only 6 of the positions are fully funded beginning July 1st. 10 of the positions are half-year funded beginning in January. So there is still going to be a staffing shortage no matter how many positions I fill come July 1st. So, and history has proven that it's been very difficult to retain individuals hired into the 911 position and have them pass the background test. So I'm hoping to fill 6. I have not been able to fill 6 before. I usually fill 5 or 4.
Mr. President, can I just comment, if Andy maybe can fill you in a little bit on the process that the trainees have to go through, because even when we get a class that's been certified, they actually have to go through, not unlike the police department, but certainly not as lengthy a process before they actually are certifiable and can be on the radio. So maybe, Andy, you can just in brief tell them what that process involves.
Sure. It's a 9-month probationary process. Beginning stages are in a classroom environment for 4 to 6 weeks. After that, there are state-required training courses that they must attend. One course is mandatory that they must pass with a 70% passing grade, or the state will not certify them as a telecommunicator. We've had some candidates who have gone to the test and failed. We're forced at that point to dismiss them as a telecommunicator. After that training, then they begin on-the-job training down in the dispatch center. Now, some people, unfortunately, after starting training, they realize that either it's not the right fit for them, they don't want to do the shift work, even though we stress and emphasize that to them. Some of them don't like the stress.
My last question here, it's on item 590051, just payment to outside agencies. Can you go into details as to what this line item encompasses, and
There should be 2 of them. That particular line item represents the service fees paid to CROG for the police department's mobile data application. We are part of the regional mobile data application that Hartford, West Hartford, East Hartford, Bloomfield, Newington all participate in. CROG is the administrator of the system on behalf of the Capital Region Chiefs of Police. The fee payable to CROG represents not only the yearly cellular subscription fees, maintenance to the system, and enhancements to the system. The cost is based on a per modem fee.
Councilwoman Jennings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jaffe. One question I had for you, through you, Mr. Chair, is the fact that you have 16 openings, and can you tell me, I mean, I'm sure it's in here, but how many Hartford residents are currently serving as dispatchers, and how many total are there?
Currently, the department has 19 Hartford residents, 49 non-Hartford residents.
And I'd also like to ask, through you, Mr. Chair, again, are those monies strictly Hartford monies, or are we receiving state and federal monies to fund the 911 call center?
There is a combination of local dollars and state 911 subsidy funds.
Okay, and how much approximately is are Hartford monies?
The salary figure that Hartford is contributing next year. The salary for the dispatch center is just over $2.8 million. The 911 subsidy is approximately $600,000.
All right, and thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, one more time. Is there any particular reason why we can't do a very strong recruitment for Hartford residents for the call center for the remaining 16?
Nothing prohibits it.
If I can respond, the last recruitment that we just closed a couple of months ago was Hartford residents only. So we have been making the effort to make sure that when we have those entry-level positions that we are recruiting for Hartford residents only.
Right.
So, and I believe there were about 300 applicants.
300 applicants.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, are these 300 applicants still on a list, or are we going back out to recruit again?
There's no list yet because there has not been a test. in order to get on the list, you have to have a test first. So the test, I spoke to the ladies in HR just this morning, and they told me that they're preparing to give the test any time now, which would be a typing test.
Okay. Right, so that those individuals who are the 300 individuals, those 16 vacancies will be filled from those 300 individuals. Is that correct?
Yes.
We hope so. As,
Okay.
as Andy mentioned, the process, we start with 300. Unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, we don't end with 300. A lot of them, sad to say, do not do well in the typing test, and so a lot of people get eliminated just because of the typing test, which is a prerequisite for the job. Obviously, just because of the nature of the job, it does require that they be very familiar with the keyboard. And so, one of the things that I've asked for the folks in HR to think about, at least for the next recruitment, is to whether we can come up with some sort of a course that we can offer to people that are interested in applying for the position that helps them with their typing skills. For the first time, we are sending out letters to all the applicants, inviting them to the test and letting them know that there will be a typing test and that they're required to be able to type at least 35 words per minute so that at least they can practice and hopefully sharpen up their skills. And unfortunately, there might be some who might decide not to come for the test because they don't have any typing skills at all. But in previous years, we had not even let them know that, in fact, there was a typing test that they had to prepare for.
Right. So, through you, Mr. President, Mr. Jaffe, do you believe that out of 300, we may have 16 that can make it through the typing test?
16 will certainly make it through the typing test. There is another test after that one. It's a 2-phase test.
And what is the next test?
The next test is a multitasking test, so that it gauges the person's ability to perform multiple functions at the same time, very similar to what they would be exposed to in the dispatch center.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again. Do we have a test preparation booklet or something where people can know what kind of test to expect so that they can, if they want to look up those kind of questions, can do so? At least give them a sample of the questions that they're going to be faced with.
I know the city doesn't have anything. I do believe there are commercial books out there for telecommunicators, but the city does not offer any type of pamphlet or booklet.
And through you, Mr. President, again, when you look at the booklets that are out there, the commercial booklets, was this test designed by someone who maybe developed those commercial booklets? And is this test comparable to what you would find in a commercial booklet?
Yes, this is from a reputable testing company, and the questions would be very similar to what they would see in a commercial study guide.
All right. And because generally a reputable testing company would also have some sample practice test questions for us to use, so have we asked them for those?
We have not made that request, but we certainly could have human resources follow through.
I'll be happy to talk to the ladies about something, whether that's something that we can do with the testing company.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Kennedy.
Real quick, and I mean, it's kind of a budget question, but maybe not necessarily. When I voted to confirm for the position that you currently hold, given assurance that you in fact live in the city of Hartford, and that's kind of become the subject of a bit of contention. And we've recently passed a resolution requiring all department heads with respect to the city. So without getting details into it, with your previous residence, did you sell your home that you lived in previously before moving to the city of Hartford?
No, I did not sell it.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. President. First, I had the same question, I suppose, in nature. So I thank Councilman McKinney for asking. I had two very simple and very short questions. First, does anybody know if they still teach typing in the high schools like they did 100 years ago?
Couldn't answer that one. I know my mother used to teach it for 30 years.
I think that'll be next Tuesday's presentation.
That's right. And so then the next related question is, has anyone thought of buying the simple Dragon or Siri voice recognition so that someone who can't type can speak?
It has not been considered. I don't know if it would be able to fill in the data fields that are necessary for entry into the CAD system, if that's where you're going to, Councilman Deutsch.
Well, I mean, this is, last I heard, the 21st century, and all these voice recognition systems are getting pretty good. So I wonder maybe someone can explore that, because field to field or in a text box, it's not very hard to install a voice recognition and then to just test its validity in a short time on any given individual.
I will explore that with the developers working on our new CAD system. I know it's certainly nothing that would be feasible in the current version, but possibly that's something in the new version that we are working towards.
Right. I'd like to give credit to my two colleagues. Councilwoman Jennings used to teach test-taking preparation, as I recall, and did so very creditably. And the gentleman to my left is an expert in computer applications. So we have plenty of talent right here. Thank you.
But just for the record, you're not suggesting that they be hired to do this work.
No, we should do it for free. I would.
Just for the record, council members always work way beyond their designated hours.
Councilwoman Jennings.
I would just like to suggest that since we have so many schools and we have adult education, that one of the programs that we meet with adult education to see if we can bring about is training in the test-taking skills, the multitasking, as well as training in the keyboard skills that are required, so that when the tests come up, we'll have a number of individuals who are interested in the job, maybe have them come and look at the call center and see how that works, and talk to someone from the call center, and maybe have them take up in adult education program that would prepare them for the Hartford workforce, and that way we could focus more on Hartford residents being prepared to work in that environment.
Something certainly that can be explored over time. I would certainly not be opposed to it. I do encourage people, if they want to come into the dispatch center, to certainly come and view it. That is certainly something I do with candidates.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. I think that would be probably a request for human resources to provide that kind of research and training and support, and work with the school system to make sure that we're putting out the kind of individuals that will be eligible to take these tests and take these jobs.
I agree. As I mentioned to you, I was surprised and disappointed to know that we don't offer some sort of support for people with their typing skills, and that is a test that we give, and that so many people don't pass that test. I wasn't around 100 years ago, but I certainly had mandatory typing when I was in high school, and unfortunately, from what I understand, they do not do that any longer. That is a skill that we do need to help to supplement for some people. So absolutely, I support that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman De Jesus.
I just want to go over the overtime one more time. Can you give me the line items where the listing the overtime?
For the dispatch center? Yep. The dispatch center's overtime is 213-006 510-354. That's one account line.
280? That 280?
Yes. And there are a couple of other lines in the department. There's 213-007 for $9,000.
Say that number? Oh, yeah, 213007, yep.
And then there's 213005. Those are the three overtime line items. And that is for 15,000.
Last one, can you repeat that one?
213005. And that's $15,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Do you have a PowerPoint?
It's coming up now. It's coming up now. That's the one.
Vi's presentation is going around now, and we'll get started.
Good evening again. Sandra Key Borges. This is, I have to my right Jose Sanchez from the Office of Management and Budget, the director. I have Police Chief James Ravella. Tom Boley is next to the chief. He's in the police department, one of his fiscal agents. And then I have George Zoltowski from the Office of Management and Budget, who's going to be working the presentation this evening. Chief?
Good evening, Council President, councilpersons. Thank you very much for having me this evening. I have a very brief presentation for everyone. I'm just going to run through a few of the crime stats to present date, and we have a brand new one with another added reduction in crime. What you're seeing is the 24%, but I couldn't get this week's in there, which is another increase in, or decrease in 10% overall. So these are snapshots that we look at constantly at the police department, and these are available online also. Another snapshot when we start to look at violent crime, that your homicides are down 18.5% from last year, which is a very good indicator of how we're trending. With that are the number of persons shot, and that is also trending downward. Your violent crime numbers are trending downward. That 122 number is actually 121. Somebody actually admitted they shot themselves recently. So we are trending down in that fashion. As we move to the total police budget, I've broken it down in different sections. 83% of your overall budget is salary alone, 89% including part-time and benefits. And we've broken them out percentage-wise and dollar amount-wise as a visual of how the budget looks. This is the trending pattern of your overtime for the police department. We constantly work from management and budget to track our overtime on a weekly basis, and we track it here on a monthly basis. And you can see the overtime is naturally trending down for numerous reasons, which we can get into if you're interested. With that, ladies and gentlemen, if I can't answer any of your questions this evening, I'll have them to you within 24 hours. Council President, questions?
Thank you, Chief Ravella. Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Chief.
Definitely.
I'd just like to start off with some praises for Chief Ravella and the work he's been doing with the faith-based initiative. He's been doing a phenomenal job with that. He has assigned 3 officers to take part in the faith-based initiative. They were introduced about a month ago when when the police department was so gracefully hosting the faith-based initiative's 4th meeting. So we went through a very great detail. We talked about Project Longevity, which is a initiative that's being done down in New Haven, looking to implement it up here. And also there was a very good presentation by Mrs. Taylor from out of Boston, talking about dealing with youth and violence and crime. So in that regard, also too, just to put it on the table, I have been getting the reports from the overtime from Chief Ravella. Thank you for those reports.
You're welcome.
Sometimes I can't see them that well, but I kind of print them out. They're very small. I'm getting older. But so in that regard, our relationship continues to grow. Our communication continues to grow. The information I'm getting out in the community is that there has been some strides in the right direction as far as community and police relationships. So those are starting to build and build better. The next thing I think is coming online is the block watch situation, which will be starting up very soon. So I'm looking to keep moving forward in the relationship that we're building together. And so far, I'm pretty happy with it. But the overtime, that mechanism of overtime, it's my understanding that his command staff is very diligent on questioning any time overtime is requested. It is my understanding that at his command meetings that it's reviewed almost by the line.
combined.
Okay. I'll accept that. Special Investigations Division. Again, I'm looking at overtime, actual of 99.9. We adopted 90,000 last year. Date, we are at 66,000. Overtime recommended for next year is 350,000.
I believe that's a clerical error. Some of that money is to go to the VIN unit.
Okay, if I get a written explanation of that, because it's a large clerical error within respect to overtime.
Certainly.
That is on page 25. Special events, it's category number 212012. The overtime calculations are specifically stated in 510, 351, 510, 354. I'm not going to, I mean, there are some things that have small increases in overtime, but I'm trying to get the ones that I outlined as larger increases. I noticed the police academy, which kind of struck me as a little odd. The police academy is 212018, page 27. If it is the PAL program, PAL has their own overtime. The police academy overtime was actual in 2011 was 80. We adopted last year's budget at 50. It has not been changed in the revised plan to us, and to date we've only spent 30,902. Mr. Chairman, can I yield questioning at this time and come back to this line of questioning? Thank you, sir.
Have a good evening. Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to kind of circle back to the whole overtime and special events question, has there been any investigation or exploration to the idea of changing our ordinance to require special event organizers to hire police as private jobs, as opposed to us footing the bill for providing police on overtime to service these events?
Well, that'll be part of the discussion, Councilman, but I've actually been pushing the event coordinators. If it's a for-profit event, those should be private jobs and hired outside of my budget and paid for by the promoter. If it's a paid-for event, yes.
All right, thank you.
Councilman De Jesus.
Through the chair. Quick question on the PAL program, which I think is going to be a response to the question that Mr. Kennedy just had. It's going to be moved into the police academy. It's going to be consolidated. My question is, a $376,000 operation. Have we thought about having some cost reduction for the program, and if so, what will be the effects of it? Are we paying all officers who are going out with the students? Tell me more about the program.
Well, it is going to be a response to Mr. Kennedy's question, actually, too, Councilman. PAL is now incorporated into the police academy as a management and a structural alignment because they're both at the Quirk Middle School. PAL, I could go on and on about it. Their 501c3 was restored. Their bylaws were just about to be completed. Their board of directors is being formed, and we're gliding very smoothly towards trying to jettison some of the costs from the police department. The costs to the police department are actually full-time employees there, a part-time lieutenant, a full-time sergeant, several officers, and it costs us in overtime, it costs us in compensatory time. So we're trying to guide away from that. They service approximately 800 kids, anywhere from 50 to 80 per night. They engage them in homework, they engage them in physical activities, and they also feed them before they go home. They also have vacation day camps for them during school vacation, and they have summer camps. We're also going to turn around our truancy program just to address our PAL kids, because these are the kids that we believe are the most endangered, the children that are the single parent, but they want interaction with police officers. So that's part of the program.
Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you. I wanted to take a look at the animal control line in the budget. I receive a fair number of complaints from my constituents regarding the timeliness of response to animal control calls. And I know it's a very thinly staffed operation for animal control, so I'm just wondering if there's something that can be done short of increasing the budget or hiring more animal control officers, or is there some other way we can be more timely in addressing these calls? Because, of course, an animal is mobile, and if it's called in and it takes hours for a response, oftentimes the officer gets there, the animal is no longer there. So it certainly requires a timely response in order to address the issue.
There are 4 assistant animal control officers. One just recently came back, actually, from a long-term injury. So there are 4. We can't cover 24 hours of shift 7 days a week, and they're sporadic. Officers do transport animals when they're not dangerous. When they're dangerous, we have to have a call back for animal control officers. So there is a delay. So I wish I could hire more, but at this present time, I don't think we have that in the budget.
Thank you.
Councilman Kennedy.
Thank you, and I apologize for having to step out. I believe we were at the Police Academy. We stepped away, page 27. I just found it odd. The Police Academy has budgeted overtime at 50, actual to date 39, and yet for next year's budget we're putting in 105,000 recommended. And I would understand they'd have some overtime, but that's a substantial, that's more than double the previous year's budget. So why?
We actually incorporated the PAL program into the Police Academy. Because they're both at work, I actually share a lieutenant. The Academy lieutenant actually shares management responsibility. So whatever we had in PAL was moved over to the Police Academy.
Okay. And I understand that. I'm looking at the Police Athletic League, in this current budget detail, has its own specific item, which is at 212003, line item 510354 at page 24. Yeah, it is zeroed out for next year, but even at last year's adopted budget number at 35, we're looking at an expenditure of 85,000. So again, I'm trying to figure out why is there, again, Police Athletic League to the Academy, I'm wondering why those, we would need overtime and a substantial bit of overtime in that specific organization within HPD.
I neglected to inform you. We also have a class of 30 built into the budget for this year, but they will not begin until January 1st. So there is an overtime cost to running a class. So between PAL and the actual academy and a new class, that's the budget we put together.
Okay, and I guess my follow-up to that would be, well, what does the police academy do when there is no class?
There's mandatory training for officers to stay certified by the POST, Police Officer Standard and Training Commission, the state standards. They have several give-back days a month, so they have to not only train officers in these give-back days, there's recertification in different weapons that they have to conduct, tasers, different classes they have to attend. So they maintain all those certifications.
Okay, I'm going to try to speed this along because I know other people want to ask questions. There's a special teams overtime as well. I didn't even know what that specifically was. Who are the special teams?
Special teams are the bomb squad, the dive team, which includes the boats, and it also includes the ERT team, the emergency response team, or the SWAT team. I fairly represented what I think they would spend over a course of a year and made it one line item.
If I could have some questions answered with respect to Police North and Police South, and it looks like Police Southeast. It looks like we increase overtime in North and South, decrease overtime in Southeast, just the specific reasons why the different allocations. And that can be given to the council in writing. Don't have to get into the specifics about that time, but just why the kind of shift in patterns.
If you'd like, I could give you that answer now, Mr. Kinney.
Fine, if that's...
It's just the consolidation of the 4 districts into 3, North, South, and Central now.
Okay. I didn't see anywhere in here overtime for the police task force, or the shooting task force. Where are they contained within this budget?
They're contained within the VIN unit, Vice Intelligence Narcotics.
Okay.
They also have that cold case unit, and the shooting team is in there.
So their overtime's included in that budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Specifically, I've got a question. What happens to vehicles? Could we, for my purposes, how many vendors do we have? And you don't have to answer this because I'm not sure you have it on. How many vendors do we have for towing of vehicles when they're in car accidents? If not, we can get that to me. And who are the vendors are?
I can supply you the actual tow contract, so you know the vendors.
Okay. Need to know who does the car repair work for HPD?
I can supply you that also.
Okay, greatly would appreciate that. And I do have one question. I'm specifically looking for information related to the car that was driven by your predecessor.
Yes.
The repair bill to it, which I've not been able to locate. Towing bill for that vehicle. If I could have that information.
My predecessor drove a
Black
Crown
Jeep.
Crown Victoria.
Oh,
You're referring to that Ford Explorer. It's presently assigned to Mr. Jaffe, but I can go back and look at the repair bills and the towing and anything that might be associated with that vehicle.
We can refer to all the cars that were once driven by, I believe, the Prairie Chief. I am specifically looking for the Black Jeep. Well, the Black Jeep Ford Explorer, that was driven by Chief Roberts.
I'll look for that.
Last question.
Sure.
And I asked this of Mr. Jaffe, so I'll ask it of you. The vote, and my positive vote for your confirmation was based in part on Hartford residency. So my question to you is, not to get into the legalities and all the other stuff, your prior home, which I believe was in Weathersfield, did you sell that before moving to the city of Hartford?
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I am a city resident, sir.
Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a very quick question. Just another plug. The cold case unit had a committee, had a community outreach, and I understand that was very successful. And there were actually some leads that were developed from this actual cold case community meeting, and I'd like to commend you for that. Let's keep these community meetings going. The dialogue is very, very supportive by the community and the police. We're starting to bridge the gap. But there's another concern that we have, the Kinney Park situation. I was looking at the mounted patrol. Has they been extended into the Kinney Barber piece, maybe looking at the casino piece as a means of patrolling once they are on their horses?
They regularly patrol our city parks, yes, and they've been up there.
Can we put a little more attention to that without doing overtime, of course? But if we can kind of push some more presence there, maybe as a patrol unit, I understand there's vehicles and there's been some redirection of traffic going on through the park, but maybe get the horses up there too.
And Chief, before you respond and make any commitment to that, I'm just going to save you, given my great deal of interest in the mounted patrol and questions about their effectiveness for fighting crime. Don't completely commit to them that you're going to add more resources on it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. President. And again, I beg forgiveness if I'm mistaken about this. I thought in the last budget we did not include funding for the mounted patrol. Is that wrong?
That is wrong. We discussed eliminating it, and discussions with the mayor's office in the final budget that we adopted, we did not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next.
Yes,
thank you.
there was interest in doing that.
Okay, thank you. The next question was, this is a perennial question, so I guess I'd like to know if there's anything new. Some people ask us about having a fully uniformed police officers at construction sites rather than other traffic control officers. Is there anything new on that, or is it something that we still have one or two at each construction site?
Those are the private jobs that we still have one or two or three, depending on the extent of the private job. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I think through you, I know that we still have them. I'm interested in whether it's still a requirement that they be there, and with reference that if a city is paid by the MDC or CLNP or whatever, somebody's paying those wages, and it may be the ratepayers. So that I'm just asking whether anyone has promoted the idea of eliminating the requirement that there be a police officer at each and every construction site in favor of another traffic control officer. Is there anything developing with that?
I have not developed anything like that, sir, and I haven't even heard it coming out of the state capitol this year either.
Okay, well, I just raised the question because if the city is not paying for those officers, then again, the ratepayers or somebody is paying for it, and the question is whether we can have another means of controlling traffic. The third and last question is this. We have, and again, I stand to be correct, we have some substations at Affleck Street in the South End. We did have one at Albany Avenue. We had planned to have one at the corner of Main and Asylum, which I thought City Council approved. And I see passing by that there is a Hartford police station at Trinity, at the corner of New Britain and Broad Street. And I'm just curious, what's the status of all these? My memory may fail, but I don't remember authorizing the one at Broad Street in New Britain.
Let me go through the substation, sir. Presently, the North District does not have a substation. They're working out of the old 50 Jennings Road. And I'd love to find a place for them in the community, which we can't find yet. The Central District has a substation that's been occupied on Farmington Avenue at the corner of Sigourney and Farmington. They've been there for years. The third substation that you're referring to is Affleck Street. That has been there for the longest time. And the newest substation, which you're referring to down on the Britain and Broad Street, the memo of understanding has not yet been completed by the Corp Council, but that is offered to the City of Hartford and the Hartford Police Department by Trinity College. We have not had any costs. Well, we have had a small cost for communication, but we haven't had any cost on rehabilitating the building at all. And it'll be maintained by Trinity College. And it's actually it's very good for us because we're starting that block watch in the Berry Square area. Plus, we're having problems in that 100-block area of New Britain Avenue.
But through you, I guess three questions. Doesn't City Council have to authorize even acceptance of a gift of that sort? That's the first question. Second, I forgot to mention there's a small station on Maple Avenue in the South End Wellness Station. So is it incorrect that in that vicinity there's Affleck, now Broad and New Britain, and Maple? So I just have those questions, if you could clarify,
Sure.
especially the first about authorization for it.
Authorization, we haven't accepted the Broad New Britain, and of course, we have to come for approval for the council for that. We have a very small station at the elderly housing complex on Maple, but the reality of the situation is we're moving out of 525 Main Street and getting into the community, and again, the reality of the situation is that High Street facility, new public safety center, just isn't big enough to house everyone.
But again, finally, maybe I should ask Corporation Counsel or Chief Operating Officer, isn't it a legal requirement that for creation, even as a gift of something like the station at Broad and New Britain, that City Council needs to authorize acceptance of something like that?
It is expected that that matter will come before the City Council. At this point, nothing has been definitively decided. They're still talking about whether or not that's going to work. So before we actually relocate and move in there, it will certainly be coming before the City Council.
But finally, through you, the only reason I know about it is I passed by and I saw a sign, and renovation in process. So I'm just puzzled, and I said to myself, maybe I was on vacation the day that we passed it. But how is that legally proceeding?
There is a sign there, yes, sir. But before we can take occupancy, it has to come in front of you.
I think that's clear.
But just to be clear, we're not doing the work. Trinity's doing the work. We're not spending any money doing the renovation work. So for whatever reason, the council decided that you did not want that to be a substation, then we could not move there, and they'd have to decide what they wanted to do with their building, having spent their money.
Councilwoman Jennings.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President, through you again. Chief, first of all, I'd like to say that you've done a really outstanding job with the faith-based initiative and making sure that people in the community see you and your officers there when they have violent incidents or murders in the community. And also, I'd like to thank you for taking the police officers out of the school while Sandy Hook and the rest of the state was trying to get them into the schools. I'd like to know, have you noticed any difference in having the police officers out of the elementary schools in the city?
Yes, what we did is we strategically adjusted our school resource officers. They now are, there's one assigned to each district, and strategically they visit schools on a visiting capacity. But I would like to just share with you, we signed that disproportionate minority contact agreement with the superintendent from the board, and after a short time, we've already seen a 59% reduction in school-based arrests. So the answer to the question would be yes.
That's good news. Thank you. All right. And the other thing, let me see if I had some other. Did we get clarification on the overtime and whether or not there was whether or not the overtime is within the realm of being able to meet the budget requirements?
For the special events?
Yes, for the special events.
Yes, we'll supply that to you, everyone.
Further questions? And I am on page 23-1 of the budget book. There's recommended budget. Starting with the picture of the allocation of funds. And I note that the increase in the police department's budget overall, according to the narrative, is the result of salary increases related to collective bargaining agreements and the movement of some of the cops, officers from the cops grant onto the operating side. But I note the chief's office budget, as compared to last year, it represented 20% of the overall budget. It's grown to 22%, roughly 10.3 million increase. So I just wanted to understand that, because it seems like more is moving into the chief's office as a cost center. And, conversely, on the patrol level, last year that represented 55% of the cost, and this year it's 51%.
Yes, sir. What you're seeing on 23-1 is it's just a very nice, proportionate patrol services, investigative, and chief's office management proportion for a police department. What you know is that we have 6 deputy chiefs, 3 assigned to each area, 1 assigned to administration, detectives, and professional standards. So you actually see now a reworking of the management level of the police department. So that's where you see the increase.
Okay, so the number of chiefs have increased from the prior fiscal year.
Yes.
And that reflects. So moving on to 23-3, since we're on that in the FTEs, right? So there's a net increase, as I look at it, as 3 FTEs in the chief's office.
Full-time employees, yes.
Okay. Moving ahead to 23-6, human resources. And this is more of a structural question. I understand you have, or it was my understanding, that human resources, our department had individuals embedded within the police department. But is this a completely separate function of HR?
HR exists in the police department, inside the police department budget, mainly because of the size and the complexity of the number of officers and civilian employees. Yes, so it's separate.
Okay, and those 3 individuals, or FTEs, what are the positions?
There's a senior admin assistant, a data input clerk, and an admin assistant.
But if I can add that
Sure.
Those are police department HR people.
Correct.
The HR department still does the recruitment and all the other postings and everything else for the police department. So the HR department still has an HR function related to the police department. It's just that they coordinate and cooperate with the HR folks in the police department.
Okay, thank you. On page 23-7, this is Police Academy. And I noticed that there's a 0 for general fund revenue associated with this. And I just want to know, how do we account for, it's my understanding that we train officers in the region, and how do we account for that? We do that free of charge?
We actually share quite a bit of training in the region on a regular basis. We also share manpower back and forth. If you're referring to the police academy, if we can't fill the spots, we do offer those spots to other police departments that are looking for positions. We get in return in-kind training by their training officers. So we get specialty training from their officers that we don't have to go out and pay for.
And that training is done in our facility as part of our academy, or do we send individuals outside to other facilities, or both?
Both, sir.
Okay, thank you. 23-8. Actually, just where my note is, under fiscal management. I know you and I, Chief, have talked in the past about the status of automation with respect to overtime in that system. Can you update us as to where that is for implementation?
Yes, we have spoke before on that, and there is no reluctance on the part of the police department to accept an automated system. But soon after the budget hearings last year, we had to take a long look at the system that they were developing. And actually, Stephen Shipman was just great to pitch in and help us there. But what we found is the project originated a while back. The third attempt, which is the one we just canceled, there was poor project management on the part of the contracted developer, the use of outdated architecture, and the use of discredited development methods, poor interface design. All those factors led to us, and our complexities in our contract, now starting at the beginning, but with a basis of our experience. Stephen Shipman is now marshaling the program, and I'm thinking that he's soon to have an RFP ready to go out to actually, instead of building a program, buy a program.
And so from kind of start to finish, I guess, since we're restarting, what's your sense of implementation, or when you design the RFP, what are you expecting and asking as an implementation process?
The RFP isn't completed yet, but it's very extensive in nature, just because of the nature of the business. Boy, I don't even want to give you an estimate, or it would be just a pure guess on our part as far as implementation. I'd like to see it as soon as possible. I know some of the officers just want to see it as soon as possible also. I couldn't guess at it, sir.
Okay. I'm going to make you guess a little bit. Like when we sit here again next year, are you expecting to be able to tell us how the system is going?
You know, if I have something by the end of the year, the calendar year, I would be grateful, but I don't expect it until spring.
Thank you. You have a follow-up question, Councilman, on that point? A different point? Okay. Good. Now, moving on to 23-9, and this is in 23-10. I just noticed with respect to the North District, the Central District, and the South District, they all have the same revenue associated with them. And can you explain where that revenue is coming from?
Well, they're slightly different, the general fund expenditures. They're based on manpower, and we tried to even off manpower as evenly as we could. They have a deputy chief, a captain, 2 lieutenants. We've now built in 2 sergeants, a condition team, and different community service officers and an SRO. And that's when they start to differ a little bit when they get to the CSO and the level. We just started a new program on Park Street. They have a few more CSOs because that's a business CSO experience for us, whereas the neighborhoods may not be balanced. So we try to balance as best we can. They're close.
And to be clear, I'm focused on the revenue associated with those different districts, and just understanding, one, how do they derive revenue?
Oh, the revenue part is part of our job, sir. In the program budget summary, the North District. And then they just divided it 3 ways.
That City of Hartford net revenue, no, this is not a net number. This is just actual.
Yes, if I may. This is the private duty revenues that we charge to the vendors who are out there, like MDC, working on roads. rather than booking that revenue in the finance department, we book it where it's being generated, and it's being generated by the police officer, so we put it there. So you multiply that times 3 for the 3 districts, that's about $2.5 million in private duty revenues.
Okay, and, all right, so the South District actually has more FTEs, so it's probably slightly more, but it's fair enough. And I know we've discussed this perhaps in committee in the past, but for the city, there is a net positive gain with respect to private duty jobs?
Yes, it's generally relatively small. There's a gross amount which takes the total revenues and subtracts out the cost of labor, namely overtime for police. That leaves us a certain amount of money, and then we deduct from that the benefits that are paid on those private duties, the health, the pension, et cetera. And then we also charge approximately a 10% administration fee for doing all the accounting and things like that. And then whatever's left is considered a net income to the general fund.
So taking into account what's happening, what private duty jobs are doing on our pension side, is city's position that it's still a net benefit, or is it just a net benefit on the operating budget side, but not taking the, both pieces into account?
That's a difficult one to answer. We're using what's called the fringe rate to calculate what the benefit charges should be. That fringe rate is a blended rate across the whole city. The actual benefit charges associated with that private duty could be higher or could be less than the average fringe rate. And a lot of it has to do with the pension contribution, which is a major component of that. I feel comfortable sitting here and saying that we're not losing money. The city is not losing money on private duty. Whether we're making a profit, whether we're making a big profit, we might be making a small amount, but not anything significant.
Okay, and this has been an important point, so I'm just harping on it a bit. So would you take the next step and to say, to the extent people are interested in removing private duty jobs, and I know in the last agreement that's been removed for new hires, that there's a zero impact?
I can't say that.
Right, because I thought the rationale for doing that is because we've made a determination that there's a negative impact on our pension side.
The city does contribute to the MERV fund a certain percentage of the pensionable wages associated with private duty. So that's taken care of. Whether we recapture all the investment to the MERV fund on behalf of the private duty, I can't say that unequivocally.
Okay. Thank you. Going to 23-13, back to special events. So the figure here of $689,178, we've discussed that. That's all kind of the overtime costs associated with it. The general fund revenue line of 100 and, oh, go ahead,
No,
you're shaking your head.
The 689,000 is not all overtime. The 600,000 of that is overtime. The remaining amount is there is one individual employee in special event for police.
Okay. The 170,000 of revenue associated with that private duty jobs, or what is that line?
Yes, that's private duty revenues yep, that's private duty revenues.
Okay, thank you. 23-14, snow removal operations. Small number of $10,000, but I was just curious as to what that's exactly for.
It's for officers to assist DPW with ticketing and towing so streets can be cleaned. And that's
Okay.
why they're out there.
Yep. 23-15, back to one of my favorites, mounted patrol. Now, when you read this line, right, as you've described it 2 years in a row at least, and probably longer, the goal of the mounted patrol is to enhance the image of the police department by bringing citizens and police together to make the community a safer place to live and work. And we have $321,000 associated with that and 4 FTEs. I'm still struggling to persuade myself that the 4 FTEs wouldn't be better in the patrol unit somewhere, or vice and narcotics, or major crimes, which is seeing a slight reduction. And so do we have any data associated with saying that? I'm going to assume, right, so starting with this notion of the image, right, and I'm a big believer that if we do the work, we reduce crime, we create jobs, Hartford's image will improve, right, when we do the work. And so, but assuming that some believe that more is being done with mounted patrol with respect to fighting crime, if that's the case, my question is there any data to support that?
No, sir, no data. The image portion is they are the most popular part of the Hartford Police by far, to both youth and to parents and to visitors of the city. What do? They patrol our parks where we normally can't go without what we call gators or four-wheel drive vehicles, and they spend the majority of their time in the parks.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done. Can you tell me, where's the revenue associated with confiscations of drugs, vehicles, take stuff from the bad guys?
There's 2 funds, what we call the State Asset Forfeiture Fund and the Federal Asset Forfeiture Fund. Both funds.
And I have, by the way, Jose, if you know where this is, I have the revenue detail as well. If
you go, excuse me, if you go to page 5 on the revenue detail, actually page 6, you'll see where the revenues associated with the police department are included.
Yep. Okay.
Tom Boley, who's to the right here, has reminded me that those revenues are not in the general fund. They're in a different fund outside of the general fund. Tom, you want to say something?
By the definition of the asset forfeiture funds, both by the federal and the state, they require us to keep those funds that are given to the department for those purposes separate and untouched from general fund monies. They are to be maintained and accounted separately so that they are purely used for those purposes only.
You say for those purposes. What are the purposes or the appropriate uses of those assets?
For instance, the state asset forfeiture money is used, the majority of the money is used for training for police officers, mostly outside training. I'm a firm believer that training is knowledge, and it also helps us later on in life to reduce our civil liability. The federal asset forfeiture money is used for mostly equipment items that are not included in your budget. The bigger type vehicles, some of the weapons the SWAT team uses, the ER team uses, some of the extra decaling for some of the regional equipment that we receive. over and above what the budget is. It's not a supplanting kind of thing. It's what you don't give me is kind of where we go to get it.
Okay, and how much do we have in each fund?
They're revolving accounts, and I usually get them around the first of the month, which I don't have yet. Approximately, I think there's in excess of $400,000 in the federal fund, and around 200,000, 150, 175 in the state fund.
And the purposes that you described, are those kind of the limits, the restricted purposes for the use of those funds?
Yes, they're included within their permitted use. Those are restricted by both state statute and federal guidelines.
So training and equipment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sure, Councilman Aponte.
In follow-up to that, I assume you then have to justify these expenditures to someone. Just a little bit about that.
I have to maintain a log of, if they come knocking for an audit, I have to maintain a log which specifically says what I purchased, why it wasn't allotted for in a budget, and for instance, what it was used for. And that category must be a permitted category by both state statute and federal statute.
Mentioned if you get audited, there a reporting mechanism apart from if you get audited?
Yes, the federal mechanism is a audit every year, a reporting to them. The state is if I get audited.
Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Chief, I'm sitting here confused as heck about some things that we said a few minutes ago. I thought in recent years we had all talked about emphasizing community policing, emphasizing things like foot patrol, bicycles maybe chained to a post in front of a substation, or even, for that matter, a hitching post for a horse. When I count up what you said, basically there are 3 stations or outposts in the south end, and I can't count any except maybe Jennings Road in the north end. And I wonder about MOUs with the Wilson Gray YMCA, with CHS, with Seatown Plaza, at the corner of Pliny and Garden, where there are some buildings, Vine Street, maybe there are empty buildings, or Coventry Street, or the Barbara Plaza. Can you give me an idea why we haven't been able to get 1 or 2 outpost locations anywhere in the north end with MOUs and things in creation versus 3 in the south end?
Well, let me get back to your the original preface here of community policing. The city of Hartford is totally engaged and immersed in community policing versus other police departments in the area. You have 17 neighborhoods, all of which have a community service officer. You have 3 districts, all of which have an SRO, school resource officer. You have business CSOs, community service officers now. You have 3 faith-based community service officers. We're totally invested in community service. They have both marked police cars. A variety of them ride bicycles. We're out there, and they're mostly, you're more in touch with the public than ever before. So, in regards to the North Substation, we have explored a few options for the North Substation, but realistically, it's a monetary issue, and I haven't really gotten to that yet because it's a rent issue. We're going to have to ask you for rent to pay those things.
Okay, well, I hear that, but I'm sitting here reading, the statement, for instance, for each district, where it says to provide uniform preventive patrol, timely response to citizen calls, cooperation with community partners, and so on. And again, I just thought that we all felt, for goodness sake, having the officers walk or ride bicycles in close proximity to each neighborhood, or again, having horses, who knows, that the physical presence there would be worthwhile, in addition to having officers assigned a district, but not being there, not only during the day, but maybe at night. So that's my bewilderment, I guess, that we haven't already done that.
Except for the substations, sir, they're out there. They're out there.
Well, where, though? In other words, in the north end, in the Albany Avenue vicinity, maybe I'm not aware of the substations.
No, I think he's saying the officers are out there. The substations are not, but the bodies are out
Well,
in the neighborhood.
The police officers are in the community, sir.
well,
They're detached actually from the patrol assignments or the dispatches for calls for service. And we are pursuing other substations. It's a costly manner, and it's time consuming to do that. But we are pursuing that.
and so finally, so their presence basically, at least in the north end, or all over, is in vehicles rather than on foot or on bicycles or horseback, right?
No, in the nicer weather, you'll actually see them on bicycles. You see the traffic division around the motorcycles year-round. And the north end does have beats. It has Albany Avenue beats. It also has a Blue Hills Avenue beat, which are uniformed police officers. So on top of your CSOs, your SROs, your faith-based CSOs, you have beats in the north end.
There are no further questions? Comment? Councilman Kennedy.
Thank you. I know the Chief Operating Officer said we were free to give our opinions about the potential concessions that would be upcoming. I just want to throw one out to the staff as you consider your concessions and the information which we'll be bringing back to the council. Much along the council president's line of questioning, I have concern about the long-term pension costs, particularly with overtime. You don't just pay for overtime now, potentially when you give it out to a police officer according to the contract. Depending on the age of the retiree, it could be something that occurs for the next 40 years in expenditures. I suggest, and you don't have to take my suggestion, but it is meant best of intentions, that the overtime provisions regarding calculation into an employee's pension benefit be eliminated for the preservation of the MRF. We have had increases from the MRF. I've been here, and I'm just going to go back a few years now, from 12 to 18 to 24 to 36. We're not 44, going to 49 and 50. That is an unsustainable pace. It will bankrupt this city. And there's a large difference between an officer with a $7,000 salary retiring with a 70 to 80% pension of that 70 versus one retiring with one with a $100,000 plus pension in terms of the payout over that time span, which you're one of the poorest cities. I love this place, okay? But you're asking people in the city who work hard every day to pay some of the richest pensions. It is not fair to them. So when we open up for union concessions, I hope you will strongly consider the possibility. I believe in fairness. Maybe the folks who are already receiving the benefit can be grandfathered in. But at some point, this has to end. Or in a very short time, as I've discussed in the back with many of you, we will be looking at the possibility of some very dire financial situations. And the situation that at some point, if it continues at this pace, then we will not be able to no longer be the final decision maker about. Someone else will come in and make decisions and rework and redo contracts. So I'm hopeful that we can all reach a reasonable accommodation for the health of the city, the MRF, and the people who benefit from the MRF. Because we're looking at our payments this year as we struggle with the budget. We're not even approaching the number that's being requested. We're budgeting $24.5 million. The ARC payment requested is almost 20. Now, I mean, we're just a little over half of what's being requested. And if we're short, we'll have to come up with it out of the rainy day fund, which by your own testimony would exhaust the fund at the end of this fiscal year. So I ask you very sincerely, please come back to us with concessions, not just short term, but long term.
Yes, sir.
And on that positive note, Chief, thank you very much, and the team, for your presentation and your answers.
You're welcome, Council President and Council. And I will follow up with your requests by tomorrow, Mr. Kennedy, for the request you made.
And Mr. President, I just wanted to remind you that tomorrow I'm going to be out of town, and I'm going to get here probably around 6:30. So Jose's going to start without me, and I'll join you as soon as I possibly can. I
Okay,
apologize.
so when he says I can start and you're not here, listen to him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Hopefully around 6:30 I should be here.
All right, thank you. All right, we are adjourned.
What happened with fire? What happened with fire? Fire.